Hello and welcome to round 4 here at the World Magic Cup. A little bit of a change to our scheduled programming. We have actually got Israel against Brazil in the feature match area. We're going to head down to the feature match area right now. Myself, Tim Willoughby with Ben Stark to bring you all the action. Hello and welcome to round 4 here at the World Magic Cup. We've got on the left of our screen there, that's Team Israel with the current reigning world champion Shahar Shenhar at the helm, sat in seat B here of this matchup. Up against Team Brazil. Now his opponent, Thiago Saporito, he's had some real success lately on the Pro Tour also. He's had a top 8 this last year. But this team also led by Willy Edel, 2 powerhouse teams in the feature match area. Ben, start.
Yeah, and we're looking at Shahar Shenhar leading off with a Forest playing against Green-Red Monsters. Not one of the decks I expect to see a ton today.
Yeah, an Elvish Mystic there from Saporito. Now, Saporito was playing Abzan at Pro Tour Kanzatakir, and it's actually Shahar Shenhar who's got the black, green, and white, but a little bit different to some of the decks you might have seen, because this is all about Whip of Erebos. Okay, so it's more like the Sidisi Whip deck. He just seems to have cut the blue in favor of a few white cards. Yeah, he's got a couple of Banishing Light, a couple of Copper's Abzan Charm, but more or less what we're looking at here is green-black all the way. So this is the deck in Unified Standard that's going to have the Sylvan Caryatids, it's going to have the Courser of Krufix. And we see early on here, Shahar, it's important to him to get the white mana. He's already fetched one with his Windswept Heath, but at the moment, I wouldn't imagine that he can really have placed Saporito on being red-green based on this start. Right, and it might be an auspicious start for Shahar because white is a very light splash in this deck, so I imagine he does not need a Plains on turn 2. I wonder if Saporito will pick up on that and maybe suspect that Shahar might not have the best mana. Well, if he wasn't quite sure what was going on, the jig is very much up now with that Satyr Wayfinder, finding another Windswept Heath for Shahar Shenhar, but revealing a Siege Rhino, so all of a sudden it's very clear that Shenhar doesn't have the black mana that he really needs. You don't see that all the time in Constructed. Saporito just morphed on turn 2. Yeah, I mean, playing a Morph on turn 2, pretty solid regardless, not something you see full stop in Limited either, but how many Morphs are there realistically that can be represented in the whole of Standard that are really seeing play? It's pretty much Rattleclaw Mystic or an Ashcloud Phoenix, and we know that both of those are in Saporito's deck. Yeah, and those look to be the only Morphs in his deck. And looking at the hand for Saporito, there's some action here. A couple of copies of Kratos Claws along with Stormbreath Dragon and Pelucranos World Eater. So this, a very straightforward sort of monsters build, I guess. Yeah, we've been seeing this deck for a while. Even in the last Standard, before Cons, there was always red-green monster builds. And Courser of Krufix revealing Landwire Waste on the top there for Shahar Shenhar. He is going to be able to get black mana on time, and that means that Siege Rhino, if he had one in hand, he would be able to cast, but it looks like he's got a slightly different set of options available to him. Let's take a little look there. Whip of Erebos, Doomwake Giant, Soul of Innistrad in his hand. Lots and lots of black options, and with an Urborg Tomb of Yawgmoth, even those double black mana costs, not likely to be a problem. It looks like Saporito has some options. We know that he has Ashcloud Phoenix if he didn't morph it. Also Pelucranos. I don't see the Ashcloud in his hand anymore, so is that what he morphed, or was it a Rattleclaw Mystic? His morph was a Rattleclaw Mystic, but he's now got the Pelucranos in play, and that potentially able to do good work at just mopping up some of the smaller creatures available to Shahar Shenhar. We'll just take a little look at that Pelucranos there. Okay, I understand what he was thinking about now. I guess he could have on-morphed the Rattleclaw Mystic, which gives you 1 extra mana, which would have given him the 5 to be able to Crater's Claw as the Courser of Krufix. I guess he's saving it because I don't know if he has more lands in hand, and he might need the 5 mana to bring out Stormbreath Dragon. That certainly seems reasonable. Also, I mean, it does mean potentially quite a lot of reach if he needs to pull things back when the board gets a little bit fuller after he sort of had his initial assault. So Shahar Shenhar here, a little bit behind things. His mana draw is perhaps not as smooth as he might have liked early on, but with a Whip of Erebos coming down now, he is going to have access to potentially quite a bit of life gain and creatures coming back. I mean, whipping back a Siege Rhino is certainly not the worst thing in the world.
Yeah, and we know this game can go good for Shahar because he also has a Doomwake Giant in hand, and knowing that Morph is a Rattleclaw Mystic, I mean, that's a 1 toughness creature, Mystic's a 1 toughness creature, so in the event that Saporito cannot finish Shahar off quick, he's probably not going to win because Shahar's going to gain a huge advantage if he's able to kill both of those creatures and put a 4/6 in play and live. It might not be so easy for Shahar to live through Polychronos and Stormbreath Dragon, though.
But I mean, all of that life gain that's coming from Shahar is effectively counter magic for the burn spells that are in Saporito's hand. If he can successfully get through this early game, then the late game seems to favor the black-green-white deck.
Definitely agreed. And it seems like we have clear roles in this game. It seems like Saporito's the aggressive deck right now. He's got to end this game quickly if he's going to win. And Shahar is going to be the controlling deck, the one that has inevitability, as we call it, and will win if this game goes long.
And we see here Saporito absolutely aware of that role. He uses Kratos' Claws to kill off the Courser of Crufix. He's then got further removal in the form of Polychronos' monstrosity ability to kill off the Satyr Wayfinder. No life gain available for Shahar Shenhar as all of his creatures currently off the board.
He does find that land, though, for that big Doomwake Giant.
So Doomwake Giant now meaning there's only 2 creatures on the board. Polychronos is big enough to fight the Giant, but there's not too much going on now for Saporito, who's going to just have to content himself with the 1 giant monster. Shenhar down to just 12 life here now, and we know that there is another copy of Kratos' Claws in Saporito's hand. That, along with a Lightning Strike, puts him functionally on comparatively low life, and it looks like Thiago Saporito happy to go for the throat here.
I think he's burning him out. I think the attack from Polychronos for 6 put Shahar from 12 to 6, and then he was able to deal the final 6 points there with the Kratos' Claws and the Lightning Strike.
So a quick win there for Team Brazil. Obviously very happy to get a win on the board against the world champion, but we'll be back with more Magic very shortly after these messages.
Have you ever dreamt of drafting the greatest hits of Magic? The all-new Legacy Cube is available on Magic Online until December 10th. Download Magic Online at www.mtgo.com and live the dream. Start on your road to the Pro Tour in Vancouver next July by playing in a preliminary Pro Tour qualifier. With more than 2,000 WPN locations running events, you're sure to find one near you. Visit magic.wizards.com/pptq for schedules and information.
So we're back here in round 4 of the World Magic Cup. We're going to take a little bit of a look in on Table A. So on the left of our screen for Team Israel is Stav Brenner. He's playing blue-black control. He's up against Mateus Rosetto. Rosetto is on red-white tokens. Now, one of the things that both of these teams seem to have latched onto is the red-white tokens deck that was played by Sam Black just a couple of days ago at the World Championship. That deck's a little bit unusual. It's got a couple of kind of interesting choices, but it seems to have been popular this weekend, largely just because it doesn't conflict too much with other decks.
Right. I think that deck is so new. I don't think anybody really knows how good it is yet. But what people do know is it doesn't use a lot of the dual lands because it's only a 2-color deck. So you're able to play it and still have access to other decks, other similar decks like Mardu or Jeskai potentially. Probably not Mardu or Jeskai, but the point is it doesn't overlap with that much because it's only a 2-color deck.
Now, it looks like it might have a bit of a tricky matchup here against blue-black control, and this is something that Sam had said in the World Championship as well. We're already up to 6 lands in play for Stav Brenner, and that not exactly where the red-white deck wants to be, with Stav still on a relatively healthy 14 life.
Yeah, and blue-black controls another deck like Sam's that I think we'll see more of in this tournament than we do in most standard tournaments because it's a 2-color deck, and it doesn't play a lot of the same cards that all the top-notch standard decks that we're used to seeing weekend to weekend play.
And we've just heard a result from one of our back tables. Willy Edel from Brazil has also taken a game over Ilan Bassan. So currently, we see Brazil leading in 2 of the 3 matchups that are going on here. Realistically, this is probably the game that's going to take the longest to complete. Blue-black not necessarily known for closing out games quickly.
Especially when they have a clear board on turn 7. I mean, tons of life and a clear board is exactly where blue-black wants to be right now.
So we see a Jace's Ingenuity there. Stoke the Flames in response, making the most of the fact that there's less counter magic available with just 2 mana, taking Stav Brenner down to 10 life. But 10 life is plenty for a blue-black deck that will have a few ways of gaining life between lands and such like.
Yeah, and he may have some counter spells, Disdainful Strokes or Dissolves, to prevent further burn once he gets too low.
And Perilous Vault, a very key part of the blue-black control deck. That one that wasn't necessarily played by everyone at the last Pro Tour, but everyone's kind of got the memo now that if you want to get rid of everything in play, there's little quite as powerful as the Perilous Vault.
It's really hard for a blue-black deck to profitably answer planeswalkers that have been activated, creatures with, you know, put other creatures into play and things like that because they don't really have great sweepers. But Perilous Vault just does that job and exiles everything.
So if you're Mateus Rossetto now, you know you've got 11 damage left to deal, and this blue-black player has pretty much a full grip. What's the plan? Do you kind of have to build up a bunch of threats and hope it works out?
You're in a really bad spot. I mean, you really just got to keep burning him, hope he doesn't have counter spells. I mean, you know that you're an underdog in this game.
Yeah, we see there a couple of copies of Chain to the Rocks being drawn by Mateus Rossetto. Those likely to be something that he sideboards out for games 2 and 3, because there's really not that many creatures in the blue-black deck, and most of them are pretty safe against removal.
And you see he played a Radiant Fountain to gain 2 life. That's going to make the burnout plan really tough. Especially they use synergy with that in Pro Lake Ancient usually, so that they can return the lands to their hand and replay them and basically keep gaining life and just keep themselves permanently out of burn range.
So Stavbrenner there playing a Despise, not seeing anything to take, but that information not worth nothing. He now knows quite what's going on. It looks like Stavbrenner in a pretty solid position here up against Mateus Rossetto. We're going to jump back though as our current world champion Shahar Shenhar plays Game 2 against Thiago Sapariso. So I'm guessing that what Shahar Shenhar is going to be looking here for in Game 2 is just kind of a solid start. The green-white-black deck is really just sort of trying to say, if the game goes long, I've got lots of value, right?
Yeah, that game may not have looked close because it ended so quickly, but it was very close with the Whip and the Doomwake Giant in play. If Saporito hadn't been able to burn him out for virtually Xaxes that turn, and Shahar had been able to untap, hit for 4, gain 4 life, and play multiple more creatures, I mean, Shahar would have definitely been in a comfortable position.
We see here the stats for the Israeli team. Shahar Shenhar, really the superstar of this team. There's 15 Pro Tours there. I'm pretty sure that most of those are Shahar. And then 7 Grand Prix top 8s, 72 GPs in total. But a solid win percentage here from Team Israel.
And Shahar, with a start like that he'd much rather see than last game, turn 2 Caryatid. You know, he's now got all kinds of mana, access to 4 on turn 3. Basically, one of the best things you can be doing in Standard. And it looks so innocent, but it's really, you're at a huge advantage in Standard if you can start with a turn 2 Caryatid. That's why so many decks play it. So much of the field are these green mid-range decks, and virtually all of them play 4 Caryatid.
I mean, that really one of the big decisions when you're trying to build for Unified Standard is who's going to get the Caryatid, who's going to get the Courser of Crufix, because that pairing is just one of the stronger things you can be doing in Standard, full stop.
Right. Virtually no decks in this Team Unified Standard tournament will not have 4 Caryatids between them.
And the alternative in terms of mana acceleration is that Rattleclaw Mystic, which we see from Thiago Saporito. The Rattleclaw Mystic, though, much more vulnerable to removal and potentially not doing quite as much work, though it will fix 3 colors of mana, albeit one of them not necessarily quite so useful.
2 blue and a black with this with Warbog. Yeah. And I will...
So it sounds like we can just hear a little bit in the background that there might be some floating of mana for a Pearl Lake Ancient that's being played by one of the other players on the Israel team there, Stavbrenner. But in this game, we see a Hornet Nest coming down for Shahar Shenhar. That kind of an interesting addition that might be quite good in this matchup.
Yeah, we kind of discovered that during the testing for PTK as a really good card against Kibler's Timor deck. I have no idea how good it is against this Red Green Monsters deck, but that deck is pretty similar to Timor, so it's probably pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if you're ever in a position where all they have is ground creatures, it's something you really don't want to be attacking into.
Yeah, it's virtually moat. They just cannot attack and give you 4 1/1 Death Touch or something of that nature. So they really have to try and work around it, and there aren't that many ways to do it. Ash Cloud, Phoenix, and Stormbreath Dragon come to mind. But other than that, it's real tough to attack on the ground.
And those Heir of the Wilds, you almost don't want it to get the +1/+1 when attacking with Ferocious if it's going to have to attack into a Hornet Nest, because every extra point of damage, that's an extra 1/1 flying Death Touch insect, and the Death Touch is just the death knell, really, for many decks. And Siege Rhino there, putting Saporito down into single digits, down on just 8 life now, and Shahar Shenhar on 19. It seems like things pretty swiftly getting squared up here for Shahar, the Israeli world champion.
Attack for 6. You go to 8. And go to discard.
So Saporito here, having a little look at his hand. It does look like there's an Ash Cloud Phoenix in that hand. That one of the comparatively few cards that is going to be able to attack through Hornet Nest with impunity.
Kind of interesting, he does attack into it here on the ground.
Now, if you're Shenhar here, what do you expect from that attack? It feels to me like there's a bit of subtext there that not every player might spot.
Yeah, I mean, it says that, I guess, he's not really afraid of the 1/1 Death Touch, but, I mean, he should be. So I think it may have been a semi-bluff. I don't think he wanted Shahar to block there.
And Ash Cloud Phoenix, one of the comparatively few flyers available to Saporito in order to be able to get through. And look at Shahar Shenhar's hand here. There's not a whole lot going on, just a whip of Erebos and lands. It may well be that actually these attacks from Saporito are quite sort of appropriate because pretty much everything that Shahar has is on the table.
Right. Well, if Shahar can't answer the whip, I mean, if Saporito can't answer the whip, Shahar's still going to get a lot of mileage out of that. I mean, you see him dealing trample damage, gaining a bunch of life here. He's going to be able to whip the Siege Rhino back into play, drain for 3, and then attack with it. So obviously Shahar does need to find other things. He can't win just with what he has, but he's going to have all kinds of time.
And a Kratos Claws I pick up there for Saporito here. Obviously did a lot of good work in game 1, and Kratos Claws is interesting actually because there's obviously been a lot of different X-Burn spells in Standard over the years. This one seems to be one of the bigger ones for Constructed because the extra +2 damage when you've got 4 power comes into play an awful lot.
Right, whenever you can cheat on mana, that's usually something pretty powerful in Standard. And X-Spells have traditionally been just below playable. Cards like Fireball and, you know, all the different Blaze variants, they see a little bit of play, not a lot, sometimes. So when you add +2 to them, they become a very good card.
And it sounds like we've got our first win on the Israeli side of things. Starbrenner picking up that first game against Mateus Rosetto. It didn't look good for Rosetto at the point that we looked in, and while it took Blue-Black a little bit of time to get there, it did do so. But I want to have a quick look at the cards in Saporito's hand here, because he's also got Boon Satyr, and that potentially could really speed up his clock in the air in a way that Shahar Shenhar may not expect.
Yeah, kind of an amazing split card. It's a 3-mana 4/2 flash creature, but it's also a creature enchantment. So if you're in a position like this, where Saporito will almost definitely not be attacking on the ground the rest of the game, it can enhance your flyers and still be an effective card.
So Saporito content to go to the air, but on 6 life, he's going to have to be a little bit careful here.
Well, he's almost definitely going to Boon Satyr one of these Ash Cloud Phoenixes. I mean, Shahar doesn't have anything out to really attack him, so it doesn't really matter that he's low. Shahar's deck doesn't really play burn, except Siege Rhino. Doesn't deal 6, and he's already used one. I think that this is a pretty clear play for Saporito. I'm not really sure what he's afraid of. I'm definitely not the world's most familiar with this matchup, as Red-Green Monsters only recently started seeing play again in Standard. But I would think this is going to be a Boon Satyr on an Ash Cloud Phoenix and a Connect for 12.
Yeah, I mean, this Red-Green Monsters deck, conceptually, it almost feels to me like Teemo without blue. Like, there's a lot of very similar cards in terms of what's being played here to what might be being played in various Standard Teemo decks, but it's not taking up as many colors for the sake of your combined Constructed.
Right, which is interesting. Where are the blue lands being used in the Shahar Shenhar team? Because since Shahar is going with white instead of blue as a splash into the whip deck, this deck could just as easily be Teamer as red-green, it would seem. Unless maybe Team Israel has a blue-white deck or something, but I don't think they do.
Well, Team Israel has blue-black.
Oh, blue-black. Yeah, but that doesn't use blue-green or blue-red duels, so... Oh, yeah, okay, I understand.
So big attacks here from Thiago Saporito, able to swing in for 4, 8, 12 in the air, and another copy of Kratos Claws may mean that Shahar Shenhar is now going to be relegated to providing just extra advice to his teammates in these remaining games, because that's the first match completed, and it seemed fairly straightforward here for Thiago Saporito. Perhaps a little bit of matchup advantage combined with some pretty solid draws.
Where I got confused there was it's the Brazil team, of course, that's not playing Timor, that's playing Red-Green Monsters, and they are using the blue, unlike the Israelis, in their whip deck. Willy Edel is playing the black-green-blue Sidisi, you know, Hornet Queen, Doomwake Giant. Basically the same deck Shahar was playing, but with blue, not white.
And that blue does enable quite a few extra pickups. Sidisi just on her own is able to stock that graveyard particularly well and obviously create a few extra creatures with her ability. So Slight variations in deck lists as a concession to this unified standard, really making a fairly big difference overall to the shape of this match.
Right, it's really interesting because if this was individual standard, both of them could play blue and play 3-color decks. As is, they basically had to decide, do we want Sidisi in our whip deck, or do we want Timur over red-green? And it looks like they've chosen Sidisi for the synergy and just going with the 2-color red-green monsters.
Now, both of these teams have got a red-white tokens deck, and we're going to get a chance to see Elan Bassan on the left of our screen playing his version of the tokens deck up against Willy Edel's Sidisi whip deck. So, two slightly different matchups for red-white tokens. If you're looking to potentially try out Sam Black's deck in standard, there's an awful lot of extra information here for you. I know that some people came in today thinking, well, I'm not going to get so much information for what I want to be doing in standard because I recognize that there's been concessions made to make some of these decks a little weaker. But both of these decks, pretty much full-strength standard decks, haven't really been impacted too much by what anyone else is doing.
And it is kind of interesting, once again, red-white, not Jeskai, which you would think would be, you know, a little better. Possibly not, since Sam, in individual standard, chose to run this. But, you know, it is about sharing the duels and freeing up the duels. And Shahar's team has no decks that would need a blue-red or blue-white duel. So, you know, they must really think Sam's deck is good and just wanted to play this red-white deck instead of Jeskai.
So we see the first play of the game here from Elan Bassan is a Goblin Rabble Master. It's going to be powering out those Goblin tokens every turn until we see something from Edel. But Edel does have the Hero's Downfall to get rid of the Rabble Master before it can pose too much trouble. Both of these players, though, with copies of Mana Confluence in play, and you have to think that that's, at the moment, likely to hurt Willy Edel until he can find one of those whips.
Yeah, it definitely hurts Willy's deck more, because Willy's deck is clearly the control deck in this matchup. You can already see 4 creatures in play, and Willy trying to figure out how he's going to stop them.
And it's going to be difficult because there's another copy of Hordling Outburst in Elan Bassan's hand. He's got at least one copy of Stoke the Flames in hand. This potentially could be a really, really fast game. Let's take a little bit of a look at that hand from Elan Bassan now. So we've got another Mana Confluence, but then even though most of the rest of these cards look like they cost 4, in practice 2 of them might cost virtually nothing, because with one Hordling Outburst, he's got 2 copies of Stoke the Flames. The Convoke on them could mean an awful lot of damage very, very quickly from the Israeli deck.
Very similar to Crater's Claws, Stoke the Flame kind of lets you cheat on mana and cast a card that should cost around 4 mana for a lot less just by tapping 1/1 creatures. You're basically turning those guys into mana producers, and even with haste, you know, a lot of times, because you can tap them for the convoke cost the turn you play them. So Stoke the Flames is a really good type 2 card, a card you see a lot.
But of course, Doomwake Giant says, I don't care how many 1/1s you have in play, I'm going to deal with all of them in one go. And if more 1/1s come into play anytime soon, that's still not going to be too much of a problem, because every enchantment that gets cast by Willy Edel now giving -1/-1 to opposing creatures. Likewise, Ash Cloud Phoenix, 4 on the front end, just 1 on the back. Yes, it doesn't completely go away when you kill it with a Doomwake Giant, but I'm sure that Willy Edel won't mind too much turning it into a 2/2 that he can potentially just attack through without any big worries here.
Yeah, and this is exactly where Willy wants to be in this game. With a Whip and a Doomwake Giant in play, he's now gaining life. He has a high toughness creature. Elan Bassan can't go wide with a lot of different tokens or creatures because Willy is able to give them all -1/-1 by playing an enchantment. So, I mean, this is going to be a very difficult game for Elan Bassan to win.
Now, speaking of cards that have been split between different decks, one card that has been split on sideboards is Erase. Both Shahar Shenhar and Elan Bassan both playing 2 copies of Erase in their sideboard, and that likely to be a bit overtaxed in this matchup, because either of the cards that are in play right now, I'm sure Elan Bassan would be pretty happy to get rid of. If you had to choose one, which would it be?
It really depends on his hand, but probably the Doomwake Giant, because, I mean, I don't see how his hand can really beat Doomwake Giant. The only, well, he has Chandra, but, like, the Hordling Outburst is, you know, blanked by it. So, I mean, he really has to decide if he wants to start zeroing Chandra or if he wants to be able to beat the Doomwake. I think with his hand, I think he wants to remove the Doomwake, so because the Whip life gain is beatable by the card advantage from Chandra, and the Hordling Outburst can give him a bunch of blockers to protect Chandra. Whereas if he were to kill the Whip, Willy would most likely be able to play an enchantment or remove the blockers, the Goblin tokens made by the Hordling Outburst, which are potential blockers to protect Chandra, and then he'd be able to remove Chandra by attacking it with Doomwake Giant.
A lot of considerations, but one way or another, Willy Edel in a pretty nice spot here, where we can see a post-combat second Doomwake Giant. Now, with 2 Doomwake Giant, that means 2 triggers for every enchantment that comes into play. So, bye-bye 2/2 creature, and realistically, bye-bye just about any creature that Ilan Bassan commits to the board at this point. Ilan Bassan absolutely on the back foot here.
Yeah, Ilan Bassan really needs to kill those Doomwakes and kill them now. And, I mean, we were speculating what would he kill with Erase, but he doesn't even have an Erase. So I'm not exactly sure how he can get back in this game. It kind of looks like a bloodbath.
Yeah, and this has been potentially a very, very quick match. Not normal that you see 2 games going over quite this quickly. And I guess that one of the cool things about playing at least one really fast deck in a format like this, where you've got 3 players that can help each other out, is if one match finishes fast, for good or for ill, that's an extra set of eyes and set of thoughts on being able to give help in other matches.
Yeah, that probably favors Israel, as Shahar, the captain of his team, and Willy, the captain of his team. Willy still playing, Shahar able to come over and help. Unfortunately, the board state doesn't favor Israel.
Yeah, I'm not sure even having the world champion stood over your shoulder is necessarily going to make this match all that much easier. So Seeker of the Way gets to come in briefly, convokes to shoot down Courser of Krufix, but Courser of Krufix not really the big worry here for Team Israel.
If we take a look at Willy's hand, it's pretty loaded. I mean, if you're trying to figure out, how I can beat these 2 Doomwakes and this whip, you know you can't beat much else. You're just going to try and beat that. And Willy has a second whip if it dies to DC, Reclamation Sage, Drown in Sorrow, just a variety of things.
Yeah, sometimes you find yourself when you're trying to make a decision about how to play out a game, especially when you're already in trouble, as you say, well, if he's got this, I can't possibly win. If he's got that, I can't possibly win. So I'm just going to have to assume that they don't have anything and try and beat the board. Now, at the moment, beating the board might be tough. Beating the board plus what's in Willy's hand, pretty close to impossible.
Right, and that's important. Obviously this isn't the closest game, but it's a good concept for everybody to remember that, you want to play to win. You want to play to beat what you can. So, I mean, if I'm Elion in this spot, I'm definitely putting absolutely nothing in Willy's hand in my head, and I'm trying to figure out a game plan to just work through these Doomwake Giants. I'm not sure if it's there or not, but that's how you need to be thinking at this point in these kind of games.
So Ilan Bassan thinking pretty hard here. I mean, once you've got a few extra sets of opinions on each play, it does sometimes mean that some of the individual decisions take a little bit longer, but there is time. I mean, we know that the first game didn't take too long. Chandra here being taken down by Willy. Doesn't look like Willy is necessarily rushing to finish off this game particularly fast. He already knows he's in the driver's seat, right?
Right, and he doesn't want to give Elon out to burn him out because, I mean, 14's a lot of life, but you never know with Stokes and Creator's Clause. All Willy's interested in doing now is gaining life, not taking damage, because he knows as this game goes long, that's his game. And he knows if he's going to lose it, it's probably going to involve Elon sneaking in exactly enough or something of that nature.
Yeah, Edel currently on 22, and with 2 life-linking giants in play, looking fairly solid, but Ilan Bassan here saying, I'm going to play out my 3 goblin tokens. Maybe there isn't an enchantment in Willy Edel's hand. Maybe they'll get to hang around for long enough to attack, and then maybe there's the opportunity to string things together. Now, I count that as about 3 maybes. Pretty optimistic.
Yeah, I mean, if Willy wants, he just has every weapon at his disposal. Like, he could cast second whip and just keep one and then, get the trigger off the Doomwake, I believe, and kill, all of Elon's creatures. I don't know if he'll do that or not. It's a sweet play. It's unnecessary. He can also just whip in Courser and do that. I mean, I just don't even know what Elon's game plan is here. I mean, it's, I guess, there's a lot on the line. I mean, you're not just trying to concede, but, I mean, this one is pretty much wrapped up.
He's getting some sweet camera time at the World Cup.
Yeah, I mean, that's special.
And a smile on his face there, Ilan Bassan. If anything, to look at the faces of these players, you'd think that Willy Edel was the one in the losing position. He's a little bit more serious in this situation. But I guess right now it's almost a question of, from Willy Edel's side of things, how do I make sure I just don't screw this up?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, This is a game that in playtesting or something I would certainly concede. And yeah, there it is.
Yeah, lots of handshakes here coming from both sides of the table. A little nod there from Willy Edel. We don't even have to move to the last match. So even though it turns out that the blue-black control seemed pretty well positioned against red-white tokens, this now just sort of a match for a bit of pride, a bit of practice. It's not going to provide any impact on the overall situation.
Will they play it out?
It looks like they're going to play a little bit from here, but no, there is a handshake from Stav Brenner of Israel. They're going to take a little bit of a break now. So that our result, we see a win. The first two matches were all that were needed by Brazil, and Israel takes their first loss of the tournament.
3-1, still a good place to be.
Absolutely, but thinking about Shahar Shenhar, he's already in the top 4 of the Players' Championship. It must be a real tax on your attention, on your energy to be able to play in one massive tournament, the biggest tournament of the year for you, and then go, right, you've got one day off, and then you've got to play another giant tournament pretty much at the same time.
Yeah, and if Israel makes day 2 in this, which they are well-pined to do, he's not going to have any days off between the top 4 of the World Championships and the second day of this tomorrow.
Back in the booth here, I'm Tim Willoughby here with Ben Stark, and yeah, it has to be tough for Shahar. I mean, I'm sure he's not complaining about this sort of situation, and I think that he probably has more youthful energy than many of the players that are in the Players' Championship. But, I mean, just in terms of testing, yeah, splitting so many formats, it's got to be kind of tricky. It looks like the Team Israel have come up with a nice split of decks, though, that none of their decks really seem to be compromised by the fact that they are having to split those cards across 3 different 75s.
Yeah, I mean, their decks look good. Obviously, those were all basically Tier 1 standard decks. So they did a good job with, with that. I mean, that round didn't go well at all for them. So I wonder, how good those decks are. I think that's a question hopefully we can get answered today. I'm personally curious because I know Sam Black, known for some innovation and some creative decks, chose to eschew blue and, just play red-white and not Jeskai. I really love the Jeskai deck. So I really have no idea if that red-white deck is as good or better than Jeskai or is really not quite up to par.
Well, that's potentially something we'll find out in coming rounds, but I believe that we're just ready for an interview down on the floor. Maybe we'll get a chance to find out a little bit more about that Team Brazil versus Israel match from the players that were right in it.
Thanks. I'm Rashad Miller, and I'm here with Willy Edel. First off, let me just say, that's a sweet scarf.
Yeah, you like it, right?
Oh, I love it.
My shirt and that's my flag, so...
All you need is a hat. Now, everyone wants to know how the preparation went with you and your fellow team members.
Well, we had I think like pretty much everyone else, like I have a early Facebook group, so you can discuss like standard matchups and who is playing like limited and who is playing constructed and who is playing each deck. And my goal was like to make sure they're all comfortable, whatever the format they're playing and whatever the deck they're playing. So it's pretty much about only talking. One of my guys of my team only arrived yesterday, so we met yesterday and spent like the whole day together, we ate together, and we had like a lot of talking. It's not about playing because the standard format like is pretty much established. So we need to make sure just to pick up the right decks, not the right decks for the format, but the right decks for each one of us. Because I really want them to be comfortable playing and like play a deck they know from inside out. And I think you kind of did it.
All right, so more specifically for a unified standard, how did you go about splitting up which cards were going where? I know that there was a level of what's comfortable, but, with unified standard, you're still a little bit constrained with how comfortable you can make a deck with each player.
Yes. From the start, I think like everyone, you have like a Corsair carry the deck with whip or not. Lightning Strike deck that can be like a Mono Red, Red Green, a Temur, or Mardu, and another deck. This other deck like varies a lot. I think the most common sense is Blue White Heroic, or like, and the new thing like the Sam Black brought to us on the World Championship, the Red White tokens, the kind of deck. I think it matched really good on this format. Like we are playing it, and Shahar team was playing it as well. So I think. If you didn't have this deck, we probably playing some sort of bad Mono Red or UW Blue White Heroic. But my teammates didn't like the Heroic, so we started trying to find something else, and I'm glad we found it.
All right, that's Willy Edel, Sweet Scarf and Toad. They're off to a great start. This is Rashad Miller. We're going to send it back to the booth.
Go Brazil.
Thank you very much there, Rashad. Great words there from Willy Edel. Obviously, it is difficult for some teams to get together in person to practice. It sounds like even though they've had their few issues in terms of getting together, sort of flying in at the last minute, certainly not harming their performance at this point. But yeah, some fantastic play there from Brazil. Congratulations to them, currently 4-0. But that is the end of our scheduled programming in terms of matches for round 4. So we're going to take a little bit of break and we're going to hand you back to the booth with Richard Hagan.
All right, welcome back to the news desk. We are going to try and get you a deciding game into the feature match area. I believe we have a match that is 1-1 and 1-1 in the deciding game. I'm quite interested in finding out what happens in that one, for reasons that will become apparent. By the way, sorry, Team Sweden fans, I wasn't trolling you. Honestly, I wasn't. I thought Sweden was going to be there, but you have to wait for the full write-up for your match. So apologies for that. My bad. Happens. So moving on. This is where we are. We are in the back end of round 4, the first of 4 rounds of Team Unified Standard. For those of you who've been tweeting us your sets of 3 decks for Team Unified Standard, keep them coming. Thank you very much for those. Hashtag MTGWMC for all your comments as well. We love to read them and keep in touch with you at home. So this morning, bunch of players came in, had a chat with us with their expectations for the weekend. One of those was from Team Canada. Now, you already know a lot about Sean McLaren. He's a Pro Tour winner. You know a lot about Alexander Hayne, him too. But maybe Daniel Goldfarb and David Goldfarb and Daniel Fournier, not so much. We had a chance to have a little word with Daniel Fournier.
Hi there, I've got Daniel Fournier of Canada with me here. Daniel, welcome first to France, and I want to get an idea of what the team dynamic was like. You have one of the more powerful teams out there in the field.
Yeah, thanks for having me first off. In France, it's a fantastic place. I would say very quickly that our team is very good. I'm very happy with it. It's been fantastic having kind of de facto 2 leaders with Sean McLaren and Alex Hayne. They're both Platinum pros. They've both taken up a very good job of leading the team. Sean McLaren has some fantastic, hilarious, motivational speeches that he's prepared that have been fantastic for our team spirits. And Alex has been leading us in our testing for the most part. We're feeling really good.
I would follow Sean McLaren's hair about anywhere. He's got the full, it's back.
We're considering making a Twitter parody account just for it.
I was kind of hoping all 3 of you guys would show up with the same cut, but that didn't happen. You're a little more
doesn't work. Yeah, no, it's a mess when it's long.
Now what about preparation? You know, it's not all of these teams have the luxury of having 2 essentially full-time professional Magic players on the team. Did you get the sense that you were maybe ahead of some of the teams just because of the rigors of testing that those guys have?
Yeah, we had both Alex and Sean leading our preparation online leading up to the event. Like, there were a bunch of great deck lists posted in the Facebook group. We talked a lot about stuff. And Alex actually met us in Strasbourg before this event for the GP. And we started kind of our preparation then. Sean was a little bit more preoccupied with the World Championships, which is fair. But so we did a bunch of the groundwork before that, and then Sean had some fantastic input, brought out some really sweet deck lists for us, and feeling really good about it.
Now, of the 2 formats you're going to play today, which one are you more confident in? Unified Standard or Team Sealed?
I'm generally more confident in Standard just because I feel our preparation can shine through a lot better. It's always possible that you can get dealt a bad hand in Sealed deck, whereas that's just not possible when you're able to prepare what cards you want to play.
Now, you know, I've always thought of it like this. So you guys have one of the better teams in the field, which is on one hand, it's a great gift, right? I mean, you guys have a chance to win this whole thing, but also it can act as a negative because the pressure can get raised up when you have a higher expectation. How have you navigated that?
We've navigated it with extreme confidence and lots of pep talks. I know that most of us would be disappointed with anything less than a top 8, and it's kind of nice that the structure of the tournament makes it so that there's a lot of lenience. You can take losses in multiple places, and that's totally okay.
Wow, that's great. Anything less than a top 8, you heard it from him first. Daniel, thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks very much to Daniel Fournier, and thanks very much to the guys and girls out on the floor, logistically moving everything around. It's pretty crazy out there, but the good news is we have more bonus magic for you. We're going down to the feature match area. It's the deciding game at 1 and 2 of Norway versus England. Let's hand back to the booth. It's time for bonus magic.
Thank you, Rich. All of my birthdays and Christmases rolled into one. We get to have England on camera. I would love for it to be at 3-0. Sadly, not the case. Currently 1-2, both of these teams. But this is the deciding match between those two. So we're going to head down to the feature match area and find out whether or not England can start the rally back right now. So here we go. We can see down here on the feature match area, we've got Francesco Giorgio on the left of our screen playing for England. He is up against, in Table C, Hannes Øystein, and it looks like we've got an interesting matchup here. We've got on the left of our screen, this is another sort of tokens deck after a fashion. We've got Hordling Outburst there, but it's a slightly different one because it's a full Mardu deck for Giorgio. Mardu mid-range, so he's got the likes of Butcher of the Horde, he's got Crackling Doom in there, he's got Sorin, he's got Sarkin, he's got Wingmate Rock. On the other side of things, slightly more akin to what we saw, I guess, from the Brazilian match. So for Øystein Hasnes, we have the Rattleclaw Mystics, Pelucranos, Heir of the Wilds, and so on that we saw from Red Green Monsters, but that's a blue producing land, and the reason for that is that this is full-on Temur aggro. So we've got the likes of Rattleclaw Mystic making mana in all three colors. We've also got Savage Knuckleblade, and we can see in Hasnes' hand here a Stubborn Denial, which potentially, with a big enough creature in play, is going to be a very efficient counterspell.
Yeah, I mean, if we look at his hand, he's looking to be the control deck in this game. I mean, you can see he has double Anger of the Gods and a Sarkin, so it's a pretty clear path to victory for him. His plan is going to be to keep away the small creatures and extend this game and, you know, get his Sarkin online. By comparison, we see a pretty aggressive hand, relatively speaking, by Giorgio. He has Hordling Outburst into Butcher of the Horde. If he can resolve the Outburst and it doesn't get angered, he'll probably give the Butcher haste. It seems unlikely that that'll happen. My guess is that Øystein will be looking to just anger away those tokens, keep the board clear, and try and get his Sarkin online.
Yeah, so potentially it's going to take a little bit of time for this game to really sort of fully fledge into what it can be, because Giorgio might struggle to keep creatures on the board for any great length of time here. And in fact, we see a Stubborn Denial just on the natural as a Force Spike here on turn 3 for that Hordling Outburst. He doesn't need Ferocity to be able to stop the spell he wants to stop. He manages to get up to 3 mana without incident.
And I don't know if I love that play. It's an interesting play and it's a close play because obviously you can't always Stubborn Denial something, as, you know, sometimes they have extra mana to pay for it. And he doesn't have a 4-power creature, so there's no guarantee that it'll be more of a hard counter. On the other hand, he does have 2 Anger of the Gods, which, you know, perfectly clear those 3 Goblin tokens. So it's kind of unclear if he'll be able to get decent value out of both his Anger of the Gods now that he's used his Stubborn Denial to stop the Hordling Outburst.
So yeah, that Morph token coming down for Øystein. So realistically, there's only 2 cards that's likely to be. It's either going to be a Phoenix, or it will be a copy of Rattleclaw Mystic. Now, it looks like from the exact list that's being gone with for the Norwegian team here that it's almost certainly going to be Rattleclaw Mystic, because it appears that there's not any copies of Ashcloud Phoenix in this Temur deck, so that's a little bit unusual there.
Yeah, and that makes some more sense with the Anger of Gods play. But if he had that in his hand, he wanted to be able to put it down this turn. If it was an Ashcloud Phoenix, he would probably be perfectly happy to just anger this turn and then presumably play the Ashcloud Phoenix on turn 4, face up.
Yeah, we can see there in our cards in hand view, we actually have an extra little section for you there just so that you can keep up as we do for the morphs in play. Rattleclaw Mystic there, currently face down, currently a 2-2. As and when it flips up, comes a 1-1, gains a little bit of mana for Øystein Hasnes of Norway.
So this is going to go on to be a really nice turn for Øystein. With the extra mana from the Rattleclaw, he's able to produce 5. So, you know, very conveniently here, he's going to have a Sarkin at his will and disposal and going to be able to take out the Butcher. What's going to be really interesting, though, is if he leaves that Rattleclaw so that he can use the Stubborn Denial in his hand to counter the opposing Sarkin, kind of obviously telegraphing it if he leaves it up, because why didn't he attack with the Rattleclaw? Or if he just goes ahead and attacks for 2 and then leaves himself vulnerable to an opposing Sarkin. That's a really interesting decision.
Yeah, I mean, one way or another, he's going to be leaking a little bit of information, but it may well be that it's a powerful enough play that he wants to do so anyway. Turns out he says, you know what, I'm going to attack. Now, it's worth bearing in mind at this point that while we only see 2 names at the bottom of our screen, basically this is a 4-on-4 match when it comes to making decisions. On the right of our screen, this is the English team here. We can see Fabrizio Anteri there. He is the one that's probably the superstar of the English team, if anyone. He's got a number of great finishes at GPs lately. He's got a couple of GP wins, a 2nd place, a 3rd place. There's also David Inglis kind of lurking behind there. And yeah, the whole of the English team helping out on the left of our screen. On the right of our screen, the Norwegian team. There we see, yeah, it's a pretty powerful Norwegian team all in all when you've got a Hall of Famer helping you out with making decisions. Nikolai Herzog there, able to help out where he can, and he's just rubbing his face into despair as he sees the Sarkhan from the other side of the board, because that Sarkhan, the 2nd Sarkhan, better than the 1st, not just because it's foil, because it gets to attack into the 1st one, kill it off, and stay in play with 5 loyalty.
And that's a huge swing. I mean, just a look at Øystein's hand tells us that he doesn't really have any way to answer that Sarkhan. He can only attack it for 2 with the Rattleclaw Mystic, and then the Sarkhan's going to be able to attack again. Possibly Francisco can set up ways to protect the Sarkhan from the Mystic or whatever else Øystein can deploy this turn.
So even though representing the stubborn denial might have been giving away some information, at this point I'm sure he'd be much happier to have just been able to stop that Planeswalker. Reclamation Sage coming down, kind of a naked 2-1 for 3 here, not really doing too much more than just representing a warm body. And the English side of the board got to feel pretty happy with things here, because as much as initially it looked like they were going to be the aggro deck, they can kind of almost play aggro control here, because Sarkhan can pretty much play in any position.
Yeah, and you see both these Anger of the Gods stranded in Øystein's hand at the moment without an ability to have a big impact on this game, which is kind of why I wondered if he should have maybe just angered that Hordling Outburst on turn 3 instead of Stubborn Denial it. But I guess he figured, you know, there's a lot of things I can kill with these out of the Mardu deck, and, you know, I can use my mana here, and then I can untap and morph Rattleclaw Mystic. So, I mean, it's certainly not a mistake. It's a close play. Personally, I just felt like he might want to guarantee value out of those Angers, especially when he has 2 of them.
Yeah, an interesting board here. And that Seeker of the Way there, yes, it comes down and it potentially does a little bit of work, but really it's all about Sarkhan here. This is the Sarkhan show, and as long as the Planeswalker is active, it's going to make life very, very difficult for Hasnes. But a nice draw here, though. Kratos Claws coming for the Norwegian team, and that is going to be able to do enough damage to kill off the Planeswalker if they so choose.
Yeah, exactly what he needed to see. Now he's just got to decide whether he wants to maybe attack or not. Like, if he attacks Sarkhan with both, he can probably get a good trade with one of those 2-1s for the Seeker. I don't know if he's afraid that maybe Francisco could have a Lightning Strike or something and then eat one of his 2-1s with the Seeker, which would then not be a good trade for him. I still actually would probably make that play, because if he does that, you know you have these Angers in your hand to kill the Seeker and possibly some other stuff, and you kind of almost want Francisco to kill your 2-1s in play so that you can then use your Angers. So, I mean, I think I like sending both at Sarkhan here.
So basically what we're saying is potentially we might be able to save our Kratos Claws if something strange happens, or at least get a little bit more value off what we've got in play.
Yeah, not save our Kratos Claws, because there's no way that Francisco is going to let the Sarkhan die. But he doesn't know that Øystein has the Kratos Claws in hand, so he's going to block, even if he has nothing in hand, he's going to block Seeker on one of the 2-1s to save the Sarkhan. And then you can finish off the Sarkhan with the Kratos Claws, and you got a good trade.
Yep.
Or he's going to block 1 and Lightning Strike 1 to really save the Sarkhan to keep all 4 loyalty counters on and eat an opposing 2-1. You still Kratos Claws the Sarkhan out, and then you have the Anger later to deal with the Seeker. So he's going to Kratos Claw the Seeker, which, you know, will also allow him to attack the Sarkhan for lethal. It's not what I would have done, because I feel like he almost wants to provoke a removal spell and then be able to Kratos Claw the Sarkhan out, because this is risky, obviously. If Francisco has a Lightning Strike or a removal, the Sarkhan's going to live. And that's so much worse for him than the difference between maybe losing a 2-1 or pulling removal on 2-1s, things he actually wants. Like, this looks like the right play on board because it can get the most value if Francisco has nothing. But Francisco's got a bunch of cards in hand, and removing that Sarkhan was just so important.
Yeah, I mean, realistically, killing off the Seeker of the Way, yes, it meant that there wasn't going to be any awkward moments with, oh, play a spell, make my Seeker of the Way into a 3-3, gain a bit of life, but getting the life and keeping the Seeker around not really as important as making sure that that Planeswalker is just absolutely dead.
And there are games where you can't deal with that Seeker, so you really need to Critters Claw the Seeker and then attack the Sarkin and hope they just don't have a removal to keep the Sarkin alive. But he's got double Anger of the Gods in hand. So the one thing Oyston's hand does well is deal with Seeker of the way.
Fair enough. So a draw of just a land there for Oyston Hasner, and now he's back in the same position we saw him in a couple of turns ago of going, there's a Sarkhan in play and I don't necessarily have a great answer. He had a great answer, it just didn't quite work out.
Right, he kind of went for the greedy play there. And I mean, it's not an unreasonable play, but I think given the exact contents of his hand, it's unnecessarily greedy.
Looks like Francesco Giorgio there picked up an utter end in his hand, so he's now the control player all of a sudden.
Yeah, I mean, you know that Mardu has lots of great removal, so it's kind of unlikely that when they still have a bunch of cards in hand, they're not going to be able to protect the Sarkin there. It's definitely possible, and if you needed it to be the case for you to win, then that would have been fine. But given that you don't, you just needed to remove that Sarkin. Yeah, I really don't like that play.
And it looks like Team Norway looking a little glum after the last couple of turns. Both of these teams fairly serious. I mean, at 1 and 2, as a team, you're not out of it. But 1 and 3, that's a rough spot to be in at this point in the day.
Yeah, I mean, I think in this tournament, the record you need to advance to day 2 is most likely 4 wins, 3 losses. So the loser of this match will not be out of it, but they will have their back to the wall, needing to rattle off 3 straight wins.
And that there, a foil game day promo utter end, full art there, shining in our lights. But any utter end would have done the exact same job, which is exiling just about any permanent around apart from a land. And Giorgio there, a little smile on his face. It might be that he can kind of see the writing on the wall at this point. Oystein down to just 5 life, and this game looks like it may be wrapped up for Team England.
Yeah, it's going to be tough. I mean, the Sarkin is putting Oyston to 1. It's not killing him, and I don't believe that Francesco has anything. Oh, no, he does have a Crackling Doom, so this game is over because, I mean, the 4 damage from the Sarkin plus 2 from Crackling is more than 5.
We've added it up. We've figured it out. It looks like Francesco Giorgio is going to get the final winning play to achieve the handshake. And there we go. Yep. Crackling Doom does do 2 damage in addition.
He buried the Mystic, and then he was like, oh, yeah, 2 damage also.
And congratulations to Team England. Big handshakes all around there. So England advancing to 2 and 2. They've got their Desmond. They just need to get a few extra wins so that they can try and finish up the day a little stronger after a slightly weak finish on their Team Sealed. But bonus magic. Everyone loves a little bit of it.
And that was a sweet game. I'm really glad we got to see that.
Absolutely, yeah. Lots of interesting decision points. And I think that there were... Initially, felt like we had a really good idea of who was the control and who was the beatdown, but actually, if Norway had carried on being the control just a little bit more, we might have seen a very different game there. Yeah,
it would have been a very close game had he carried on as the control player and tried to use those angers and, remove the Sarkin. We don't know that we would have won. The Mardu player still had the Crackling Doom, but, the angers would have took care of those Seekers, and it really would have that game would have went long. It would have just been a straight top deck battle for a long time to come, and we really have no idea who would have won that game.
As it is, though, the game is over. England pick up their second win. They go to 2 and 2, but we're finished now, I believe. I said it last time. Who can say for sure? I believe we are now finished on round 4, though. So we're going to pass back to the news desk, and we'll see you soon in round 5.
All right, thanks very much to Tim Willoughby and Randy Buehler down getting ready over at the wall. We've got Mark Rosewater coming in as a guest for us in just a little bit. But why don't we take a look at our master scoreboard, and I can show you what's going on here at the World Magic Cup. Now that we're at the halfway mark, or just beyond the pivotal mid-round, round 4, things are starting to get very important because we can start to see what's in front of the teams coming up. So let's take a look at the top of our table, and you see we've got right now 4 teams with a perfect record. That's the Netherlands, Malaysia, the Slovak Republic, and Team Brazil. You just saw in action there. The Netherlands won their match over Sweden to drop them to 3 and 1. Hong Kong is also undefeated with 3 wins, no losses, and a draw. Israel 3-1, the Russian Federation 3-1. You see the rest of the 3-1s pretty much throughout that shape. Now, everyone on that screen, by our reckoning, basically needs 1 more win to make it in, because realistically, even if they went to 4-1 and then eventually ended up 4-3, the chances are their tiebreaks, having been at the top tables, would be pretty good. So there's very good bet that those 18 need 1 more win, or in the case of the top 4, no more wins to make it in. But remember, seeding is critical for day 2, so you really, really want every win you can get. Let's take take a look at page number 2 of our leaderboard. Here it is, still some more 3-1s. Good job by Serbia with Alexa Taylorov, Turkey and Finland. Maybe that draw is good news for them. They'll think it's great news if they're at 4-2-1. They'll think it's terrible news if they're at 3-3-1, let me tell you. Then you've got your 2-2s. Well done, Panama. That's a good job for them at 2-2. Austria probably disappointed with 2-2. Costa Rica probably pretty pleased. Belarus and Ukraine, you see, separated just by 1 point there, 28-29th. Dominican Republic at 2-2. Pedro Papatera and co. Indonesia in reasonable shape. Italy's 2-2. Well, they've got an interesting team led by Andrea Mengucci, who got a ton of fans at the Pro Tour, but he and his team are 2-2. Scotland have fought back to 2-2, and Team USA are 2-2 right now. That is probably one match result below their best expectation at this point. Nonetheless, they've got time. Win 2 out of the last 3 should see them safely in. Venezuela 2-2. Let's move on, go into the bottom half, as it were, and you see tons more 2-2s. Colombia, the French there, the defending champions, started off with a loss. Spain are up to 2-2. I can tell you what that means is that Canada are 1-3. And as you see those 1-3s that begin with Northern Ireland in 49th right now, everyone from there down, they must win out. They are already down to their last life here at the World Magic Cup. Because if they go to 1-4, they will not be in the top 32 and coming back tomorrow. So already elimination matches happening here on Friday afternoon in Nice. Let's go to our bottom tables, and these are the teams that are left struggling at 1-3, and some of them at 0-3 still playing. Germany at 1-3. Patrick Dickman and his team have not got going. Belgium got beaten by England last round, and now they're at 1-3. Canada, as I say, that's one of the massive names at 1-3. And as you look further down, once we get to the very bottom, I can tell you that El Salvador and New Zealand at 0-4 and Bolivia at 0-4, they now will not be your World Magic Cup champions. They're the first 3 we can say with certainty will not win this tournament. So that's the state of play. Still a few results to come in. I'm going to